So usually when we talk about being caught in the middle of a conflict, there is a very specific, almost visceral physical sensation that comes with it.
Oh, yeah, like a tightness in your chest.
Exactly. Picture this. You are standing barefoot in this thick, slick mud, and in your hands, you're holding the dead center of a massive, heavy, bristly rope.
A literal tug of war.
Right. On your left side, your coworkers or maybe your friends, they are pulling with absolutely everything they have. And then on your right side, management or the other half of your family is pulling just as hard.
And everyone is yelling at you.
Yes, they are all screaming, pull, help us, pick a side. The friction of the rope is literally burning the skin off your palms. It's agonizing.
Because every message society has ever fed you says you have to grip that rope tighter.
Yeah, you have to be loyal, you have to commit to a side to prove your worth. But, and this is the core of what we're looking at today, what happens if you simply open your hands, step back, and just let the rope drop into the mud?
Well, they'll fall over. I mean, it's that simple. And more importantly, you remain standing. You are the only person on that field who hasn't expended a single ounce of energy.
Which is wild to think about because we are so heavily conditioned, almost from birth, to believe that commitment is the default setting of a good moral person.
Oh, absolutely. We view hesitation as cowardice. But if we examine the actual mechanics of human dynamics, dropping the rope isn't cowardice at all.
It's actually an incredibly sophisticated method of energy conservation. And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We were doing a deep dive into a stack of historical analyses and source texts centered around a really fascinating, undeniably Machiavellian concept.
Yeah, it's often summarized as Law 20, do not commit to anyone.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct how maintaining absolute, unyielding independence isn't about, becoming a hermit in the woods.
No, not at all. It's counterintuitively the ultimate form of leverage.
Exactly. So we're going to look at the lives of Renaissance queens who used their independence to forge literal empires. We'll look at Cold War diplomats who played superpowers against each other, and even some brutal strategic truths hidden inside ancient fables.
Because we really want to understand the underlying psychology of why playing the middle forces the world to revolve around you.
Yeah, but to do that, we have to kind of strip away our romanticized notions of loyalty, right? We have to look at human behavior through a strictly tactical lens.
We do. And the core text we're analyzing today, it actually begins with a very sharp, almost jarring judgment. It states, "It is the fool who always rushes to take sides."
Oof, that is harsh.
It is. To commit to anyone but yourself, the text argues, is to voluntarily surrender your power.
See, that word fool feels incredibly abrasive to me. If I rush to help a friend in a dispute, I don't think of myself as a fool. I think of myself as a good friend.
Right, of course.
So why does the source material take such a harsh stance on the simple act of committing? What is actually happening, psychologically speaking, the moment you declare your allegiance?
Well, the harshness is intentional because the strategic cost of that commitment is absolute. The moment you rush to commit to a group or a cause or a person, three psychological shifts happen immediately.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, you lose your mystery. Before you commit, people are projecting all their hopes and desires onto you. You're a variable.
Your pure potential.
Exactly. But once you commit, you are a known quantity. You become mundane. Second, you lose your leverage.
Because while you are undecided, both sides have to court you.
Right. They have to offer you concessions, respect, resources, just to win you over. But the second you say yes, that courting completely stops. They already have you in their pocket.
Oh, wow. Yeah, why would they keep paying for something they already own?
They wouldn't. So your value peaks the exact moment just before you make a decision.
And then it just plummets the second after.
Precisely. And the third shift is the loss of your initiative. The 17th century philosopher Balthazar Gracian, whose writings heavily inform our source material today, he argued that to commit yourself to another person's cause is to become a slave.
A slave? That is a heavy word.
It is, but he means it in the sense that you are no longer navigating your own path. You become a hostage to their obligations, their enemies, their petty squabbles.
You stop acting on your own behalf and start reacting to their crises.
Exactly.
I do have to push back on this a little bit, though, because if we apply this to the real world, it sounds like a recipe for total isolation. I mean, isn't loyalty the glue of society?
That is the natural friction everyone feels when they first encounter this concept.
Right, because from kindergarten, we are drilled to be team players. If you never commit to a company or a team or a relationship, don't you just become this, untrustworthy drifter?
Well, this raises an important question because we have to separate emotional loyalty from strategic commitment.
Okay, unpack that for me.
This framework is not instructing you to abandon your family or refuse to love your partner or betray your close friends. It's warning you against allowing people, especially in the arenas of business, politics, and power dynamics, to feel that they possess you.
Oh, I see. So it's about ownership.
Exactly. There is a massive psychological difference between choosing to support someone because it aligns with your goals versus being obligated to support them because they own your loyalty.
Right, the text is warning you not to let others weaponize your allegiance to fight their battles while you just, absorb all the collateral damage.
Yes. It's about preserving your autonomy. It's the difference between volunteering your help and being conscripted into someone else's war.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So to truly grasp how this aura of aloofness generates massive power, we need to look at the ultimate historical embodiment of Part 1 of this law. Let's travel back to 1558.
Ah, Queen Elizabeth II.
Yes, the Virgin Queen. Elizabeth's reign is arguably the most perfect case study in the history of strategic non-commitment.
Without a doubt. When she ascended to the throne in 1558, the political and social pressure on her was just unimaginable.
Yeah, to set the scene for you, the concept of a woman ruling alone back then was considered unnatural, like genuinely dangerous by the patriarchal standards of the era.
The prevailing wisdom was that a queen absolutely required a king to manage the kingdom.
Right, and more urgently, she had to produce a legitimate heir. Otherwise, there would be a massive civil war over succession the second she died.
And that pressure wasn't just coming from a few advisors in a back room. It was the obsession of Parliament, the royal court, the public.
Her marriage prospects were literally the primary geopolitical talking point of Europe.
They really were. And to understand the absolute brilliance of Elizabeth's response to this pressure, we have to look at the cautionary tale of her cousin.
Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yes, Mary was facing the exact same dilemma at the exact same time. And her situation highlights the fatal trap of the definitive yes.
Right, because Mary was ruling Scotland, and the Scottish nobles were demanding she take a husband to stabilize the realm. But the problem was the geography of power.
It was an impossible landscape.
Yeah, if she married a powerful European royal, say like a prince from France or Spain, the Scottish people would riot. They feared foreign domination.
But if she married into one of the powerful Scottish noble houses, she would instantly alienate all the rival houses and plunge the country into a blood feud.
Right. So Mary surveys this impossible landscape, and she ultimately yields to the pressure. She makes a choice. She grabs the rope.
She married Lord Darnley, who was a Catholic with a claim to the English throne, and the friction destroyed her.
It was a total catastrophe, right?
A complete catastrophe. By committing to Darnley, she instantly crystallized her opposition. The Protestant lords of Scotland were enraged. It sparked endless, violent turmoil.
And Darnley himself wasn't exactly a great guy.
No, he proved treacherous and actually attempted to seize power from her. So Mary's single act of commitment alienated her allies, emboldened her enemies, and initiated this cascade of events that cost her the throne.
She had to flee to England, and it ultimately led to her execution.
Exactly. And Elizabeth watched her cousin's horrific downfall from London and internalized a vital lesson. The moment a ruler commits, they lose the power to maneuver.
Wow. So Elizabeth orchestrates what has to be the most masterful, decades-long tactical delay in human history.
It really is.
She knew a flat no to marriage would cause a rebellion, so she just didn't say no. She mastered the art of the maybe.
The perpetual maybe.
Let's look at how she handled her domestic suitors. She had men like Sir Robert Dudley, the Earl of Essex, Sir Walter Raleigh, literally the most powerful, ambitious men in England, vying for her hand.
And she played them perfectly.
She would drop a subtle hint that Dudley was her favorite. The court would go absolutely wild, but then literally the very next day, she would publicly favor Raleigh, completely contradicting herself.
She kept them all suspended in a state of perpetual orbit. She gave them just enough hope to keep them loyal, but never enough certainty to let them feel secure.
It's brilliant. And when the pressure from the government reached a boiling point, her ability to just absorb it without reacting was astounding.
Oh, the 1566 Parliament delegation.
Yes, imagine the sheer audacity of this. A room full of men marching up to the absolute monarch and essentially demanding she fulfill her duty and marry before her biological clock runs out.
And look at the psychological discipline of her response. She didn't throw them out. She didn't scream treason. She didn't even argue the point with them.
Right. She just listened calmly. She nodded at their concerns, offered these vague assurances that she had the realm's best interests at heart, and then did absolutely nothing.
She absorbed their pressure, allowed it to dissipate into the air, and offered them no solid wall of resistance to push against.
She didn't give them anything to fight, and she applied this exact same strategy on a massive international scale, using her non-commitment as her primary weapon of foreign policy.
The international suitors were just as baffled as the domestic ones.
Yeah, you had the King of Spain, the Prince of Sweden, the Archduke of Austria. They were all aggressively courting her because marrying Elizabeth meant an alliance with England, which shifts the entire balance of power in Europe.
And she just politely dangled the prospect of marriage in front of all of them.
She kept these massive empires hoping and waiting, and because they were waiting for her answer, they weren't declaring war on England.
Exactly. By the 1570s, the greatest geopolitical crisis in Europe was the revolt in the Dutch lowlands against the Spanish Empire.
Right, and England was incredibly vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. Elizabeth needed to decide whether to form a military alliance with France to counter the overwhelming threat of Spain. France had two eligible royal brothers, the Dukes of Anjou and Alencon.
So Elizabeth needed the French alliance, but she did not want to commit to a permanent marriage that would drag England into France's endless continental wars.
So what's her solution? She keeps the hopes of both French brothers alive. Simultaneously. For years.
The visceral details of this specific courtship are just staggering to me. She allowed the Duke of Anjou to visit England multiple times. The historical sources note she actually allowed him to kiss her in public.
Which was a massive deal at the time.
Huge. She called him by intimate pet names like her frog. She gave every outward appearance of a woman who was deeply, genuinely in love.
But the reality behind closed doors was very different.
She found the man physically repulsive. The mere sight of him was distasteful to her. Yet she maintained this agonizing, highly intimate charade for years.
She endured his presence and faked romantic devotion, all to keep France tethered to her side.
Until 1582, a formal treaty of peace and alliance is finally signed between France and England. And once that strategic goal was achieved, the marriage negotiations suddenly politely stalled out. She just dropped him.
It was an astonishing display of emotional decoupling. She sacrificed her personal comfort to maintain her strategic autonomy.
And the result speaks for itself. She never fought a feudal war for a husband's cause. She ruled through an era of incomparable domestic peace and cultural explosion.
She died the Virgin Queen, leaving a legacy of absolute dominance.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The strategy didn't just prevent war. It created this bizarre psychological phenomenon. By keeping all these powerful men at arm's length, she infected her court and her country with what our source text calls the desire virus.
The desire virus, yes. She didn't just remain a queen, she became an object of literal cultish worship.
How does that work psychologically?
Well, this taps into the concept of mimetic desire. Human beings rarely desire things in a vacuum. We desire what we see other people desiring.
Oh, right, like wanting the toy that the other kid is playing with.
Exactly. When a person is fiercely sought after by multiple parties, their perceived value skyrockets.
And the sources outline how extreme this got with Elizabeth. You had men like the court physician, Simon Forman, writing vividly in his private diaries about his fantasies of being her lover.
You had the greatest painters of the era depicting her not as a human monarch, but as the virgin goddess Diana.
Poets like Edmund Spenser were writing massive, sweeping epics dedicating their lives to her. Because she was ungraspable, she became mythological.
Because when you commit to someone, the fantasy dissolves into reality. The magic is gone because you become knowable, predictable, and possessed. By never committing, you become like no one else.
Yes.
You remain a perpetual fantasy.
And you can see this exact same dynamic in modern life, right? Whether you are navigating the dating pool or the job market.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about walking into a job interview. If you project desperation, if your body language screams, I will take whatever salary you offer, I am 100% committed to this company right now, your leverage evaporates.
They will lowball your salary in a heartbeat because they know they already have you.
But if you walk into that exact same interview, engage pleasantly but casually signal that you are currently evaluating several other competitive offers, the entire energy of the room shifts.
Suddenly, you are a scarce resource. You are the prize. They have to bid for you.
And the moment they realize you are a prize, they will try every manipulative tactic to strip that leverage away from you.
Yes, they will shower you with praise, offer small favors, try to make you feel emotionally obligated to the team before you've even signed a contract.
So the core lesson here is to, welcome the attention, accept the praise, but guard your inner aloofness relentlessly. You cannot allow yourself to feel the weight of obligation.
Exactly. Elizabeth mastered this in the realm of courtship and royal marriage, where romance provides an inherent built-in leverage.
But what happens when you strip the romance away entirely? What happens when you apply cold-blooded non-commitment to the pure mechanics of politics and war?
That forces us to look at a figure from ancient Greece who turned lack of loyalty into an absolute art form.
Let's examine the career of Alcibiades around 414 BC.
Alcibiades is a brilliant, entirely chaotic example of leveraging the middle. We're talking about the height of the Peloponnesian War, which was a brutal existential conflict between Athens and Sparta.
It tore the Greek world apart.
It did. Now, Alcibiades was a charismatic Athenian statesman and general. He was the primary architect of a massive Athenian military expedition to Sicily.
But things go wrong for him back home.
Right. Shortly after the fleet sailed, his political rivals back in Athens orchestrated these trumped-up religious charges against him. They recalled him to face trial and likely execution.
Now, most men in that era would have either returned to fight the charges or fled into obscure exile. Alcibiades did neither.
No, he immediately defected to Sparta, Athens' mortal enemy.
Which is just wild.
And he didn't just defect. He gave the Spartans the exact tactical advice they needed to crush the Athenian expedition he himself had planned.
He essentially handed the enemy the blueprint to defeat his own homeland. But his stay in Sparta was purely transactional, wasn't it?
Completely. When his welcome wore out, partly because he allegedly seduced the Spartan king's wife, which is a whole other story, and it became clear Sparta was gaining too much dominant power, he didn't double down on his commitment to them.
He defected again.
He fled to the Persians, the massive empire that had historically tried to conquer all of Greece.
And this is where the sheer genius of his non-commitment reviews itself. Because he was now advising the Persians, the dynamics of the entire war shifted.
Exactly. Suddenly, the Athenians, who had just sentenced him to death, started sending secret messages, begging him to use his influence with the Persians to cut off funding to Sparta.
At the exact same time, the Spartans were terrified he would ally the Persian fleet with Athens, so they were desperately trying to win him back.
And the Persians were showering him with wealth and honors because he possessed intimate, high-level intelligence on both Greek superpowers.
By standing in the dead center of a triangle of competing empires, making vague promises to all but committing definitively to none, he controlled the fate of the Mediterranean.
Both sides vied for him purely because they were terrified the other side would get him.
It is a staggering manipulation of geopolitical anxiety. And moving from ancient Greece to modern history, we see the exact same tactical architecture deployed by Henry Kissinger.
I do.
Now, I need to add a crucial directive here for the listener. We are looking at Henry Kissinger strictly through the lens of the source material's tactical analysis. We are remaining completely impartial. We are not endorsing any left-wing or right-wing political viewpoints. We are simply analyzing the historical mechanics described in the text.
And tactically speaking, his maneuvers during the 1968 United States presidential election are a flawless execution of the Alcibiades strategy.
How so?
Well, in the lead-up to the election, Kissinger had tied his fortunes to Nelson Rockefeller, seeking the Republican nomination. When Rockefeller lost to Richard Nixon, Kissinger found himself politically unmoored. He was a free agent.
So what does he do? He quietly reaches out to Richard Nixon's campaign, and he offers them something incredibly valuable: highly classified inside information on the ongoing Vietnam peace negotiations taking place in Paris.
Kissinger had cultivated a mole inside the peace delegation.
Right. And Nixon's team, desperate for an edge, eagerly accepted the back-channel intel.
But Kissinger did not commit to Nixon. Simultaneously, he opened a channel to the Democratic nominee, Hubert Humphrey.
He's playing both sides of the chessboard.
Exactly. He approached Humphrey's camp and offered them inside information regarding the Nixon campaign strategies.
Wait, really? He's feeding Humphrey info on Nixon while feeding Nixon info on the peace talks.
Yes, and to build trust with the Democrats, he heavily emphasized his personal disdain for Nixon. He famously stated his long-standing hatred for the man.
He used his personal dislike of Nixon as a psychological smokescreen. It endears him to Humphrey while he is actively feeding Humphrey's secrets to Nixon. It is breathtakingly cynical.
Because his allegiance was not to the Republican platform or the Democratic platform. His allegiance was entirely to the preservation and elevation of Henry Kissinger's career.
He wanted a high-level cabinet position, and by making himself the indispensable conduit of information for both campaigns, he engineered a scenario where, no matter who won the presidency, he would be rewarded.
Nixon won, and Kissinger was appointed National Security Advisor. But even once inside the administration, he maintained a calculated distance.
He cultivated a reputation as an intellectual outsider. He ensured he never appeared as, a blind, fanatical Nixon loyalist.
And this subtle aloofness is precisely why, when the Watergate scandal detonated and obliterated the Nixon presidency, Kissinger remained untouched.
Because the inner circle of true believers, the men who had fully committed their souls to Nixon, they were disgraced, fired, or imprisoned.
Right. Kissinger, having maintained his autonomy, was the only senior official to seamlessly transition and serve under the next president, Gerald Ford.
And he applied this identical philosophy to the grand chessboard of the Cold War. The source material highlights the concept of détente.
The easing of strained relations.
Right. During the early 1970s, the Cold War was this terrifying bipolar standoff between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Kissinger wanted to bring the Soviets to the negotiating table to sign arms control treaties.
But he didn't fly to Moscow and plead for peace. He didn't offer unilateral concessions.
Instead, he executed a massive strategic pivot. He orchestrated a secret trip to Beijing to begin normalizing diplomatic relations with Communist China.
Which was brilliant because at the time, the Soviet Union and China had experienced a severe ideological and military split. They hated each other almost as much as they hated the West.
Exactly. The Soviets already felt vulnerable on their eastern border, so when they suddenly saw the United States actively courting China, their worst geopolitical nightmare materialized.
The prospect of a U.S.-China alliance surrounding the Soviet Union.
Yes. Kissinger's absolute lack of commitment to Moscow, paired with his sudden flirtation with their neighbor, terrified the Soviet leadership.
It was this fear, generated by his non-commitment, that forced the Soviets to urgently invite Nixon to Moscow and sign the strategic arms limitation treaties. He used a third party to manipulate the second party.
The source material uses a really brilliant, if slightly manipulative, analogy to explain this. It references the 19th century French writer Stendhal, who wrote extensively on the psychology of romance.
Stendhal's advice is fascinating here.
He advised that if you want to seduce a woman, you should not shower her with attention. You should court her sister or her friend first.
You introduce a triangle.
Exactly. You stimulate desire through the proxy of jealousy and competition. It's the exact same psychological lever Kissinger pulled with China and the Soviets.
The text also points to the artist Pablo Picasso. Early in his career, Picasso struggled. But once he achieved a certain level of renown, powerful art dealers began swarming his studio.
They would throw massive bags of cash at him, offering these grand promises of exhibitions, basically begging him to sign exclusive binding contracts.
And Picasso's response was a masterclass in psychological warfare. He would act completely chillingly indifferent.
He would barely look at their contracts. He signaled that he had zero interest in their money or their influence.
And his indifference drove the dealers completely insane.
Because it subverted their expectations.
Yeah.
They were used to artists begging for their patronage. Picasso's lack of interest communicated that he possessed a power they couldn't understand.
It made the dealers fight over him even more aggressively.
What we see across all these examples, from Picasso to Kissinger, is the incredible power of slowness. The slowness to pick up a pen, the slowness to say yes, the refusal to eagerly jump at an offer.
What's fascinating here is how that slowness actually makes the other side negotiate against themselves. When you delay your commitment, the other side begins to panic. They start raising their offers and lowering their demands before you have even spoken a word.
Everything we've discussed so far encompasses part one of this law, getting people to court you by remaining aloof. You become the prize.
Right.
But part two of the law shifts the focus from defensive maneuvering to active avoidance. It's not just about playing hard to get. It's about refusing to be dragged into the gravitational pull of other people's conflicts. It is about staying above the fray.
And to illustrate the danger of getting involved in other people's wars, the text relies on the brutal clarity of animal fables.
I love these fables. These aren't children's stories. They are ancient strategic allegories about the depletion of resources. Let's break down the ancient Indian fable of the kites, the crows, and the fox.
Set the scene for us.
So the kites and the crows are two rival factions of scavenging birds living in the same forest. They have this fragile truce, an agreement to split any food they find equally. One afternoon, they discover a fox lying under a tree, severely wounded by hunters. He seems helpless and close to death.
So the birds gather round to divide the spoil.
Right. The crows declare, "We will take the upper half of the fox." But the kites argue, "No, we claim the lower half."
The dispute is trivial, but it threatens their truce. And this is the moment the wounded fox, who is far from helpless strategically, decides to intervene.
The fox weakly lifts his head and says, "Wait a moment. I have always observed that the kites are the superior, more majestic birds. Surely as the superior species, the kites deserve the upper half of my body, which contains my head, my brain, and all the noblest parts."
The flattery.
It works perfectly. The kites are instantly blinded by it. They puff out their chests and say, "The fox speaks the truth. The top half is ours."
And the crows, insulted and enraged by the breach of agreement, immediately attack the kites.
A massive, bloody, chaotic war breaks out in the canopy above. The birds completely forget about the fox and spend the next few hours slaughtering each other.
And while the birds deplete their life force, tearing each other apart, the fox simply rests.
Over the next few days, as he slowly heals from his wounds, he feeds on the corpses of the dead kites and crows raining down from the branches. Once he is fully recovered, he walks away into the forest, observing, "The weak benefit by the quarrels of the mighty."
It's a dark story, but the translation to human behavior is profound. The fox represents the master of energy conservation. He uses words to trigger a conflict that costs him nothing.
And the kites and the crows represent the vast majority of people who live their lives trapped in what the text identifies as emotional whirlpools.
Yes, the emotional whirlpool. It's a state of constant churning reactivity. Most people cannot tolerate unresolved tension.
If there is an argument at work, a political debate at a dinner party, or a family feud, they feel this overwhelming psychological compulsion to jump in, take a side, and defend their ego.
They spend massive amounts of emotional and professional energy fighting battles that yield absolutely no strategic benefit to their own lives.
And the most dangerous part of the whirlpool is that the people drowning in it want to drag you in with them.
They will beg you to take sides or make peace.
Yeah, when people are locked in a petty conflict, your autonomy, your calm, your refusal to get angry, it offends them. They will actively try to force you to commit. They will appeal to your sense of justice, guilt trip you, demand you act as a peacemaker.
But the text provides a stark warning. The moment you succumb to pity, compassion, or a desire to fix their problem, you become their tool.
Their fight becomes your fight. You end up like the birds, bleeding out on the forest floor, having wasted your energy on a dispute that had nothing to do with you. I have to pause here, though, because this is the section of the text where I genuinely struggled with the practical application.
Oh, so?
Well, I understand the theory. Getting involved in office drama is a waste of time. But how do you actually execute this without looking like a complete sociopath?
That's a fair point.
Like, if my colleagues are in a heated dispute and they turn to me for support and I just stare blankly at them or walk away, I am going to breed immense resentment. Refusing to engage often causes more offense than taking a side. How do you maintain the position of the fox without making everyone hate you?
The text anticipates that exact dilemma. You
Yeah.
cannot simply stand like a stone statue. The true art of non-commitment requires the cognitive decoupling of outward appeasement from inward calculation.
You have to learn to seem deeply interested without actually being interested.
Exactly. Seem interested, listen sympathetically, give gifts, but keep your emotions completely disengaged inwardly.
So it's a performance.
It is. When someone tries to drag you into their whirlpool, you listen to them. You maintain eye contact. You nod sympathetically. You might even offer a vague, agreeable platitude like, "I can see why you're so frustrated." Or offer a small, meaningless favor to show that you care.
You provide the outward social cues of support that their ego is desperately seeking.
But internally, you build an absolute firewall in your mind. You do not allow a single drop of their anxiety, anger, or urgency to penetrate your inner sanctuary. You treat their conflict like a movie playing on a screen. You can watch it, you can critique it, but you know it isn't real life. Maintain your sanity.
To see this exact cognitive decoupling, this Fox strategy executed on a life-or-death geopolitical scale, we have to look at the masterclass provided by Isabella d'Este in the late 15th century.
If Elizabeth I leveraged her marital status to delay commitment, Isabella used sheer, unrelenting diplomatic agility to dodge cannonballs.
Isabella's situation was orders of magnitude more precarious than Elizabeth's. She was the Marchesa of Mantua. Mantua was a tiny, relatively weak Italian city-state.
I want to paint the geographical board for you because it is terrifying. Imagine living in a small, fragile glass house, and your immediate neighbors are violent, heavily armed mafia syndicates who are constantly launching explosives at each other's properties.
That was Mantua in 1500. It was entirely surrounded by the dominant powers of the era: the Republic of Venice, Florence, the Papal States in Rome, the Duchy of Milan, and the invading armies of France and Spain.
Every single one of these massive powers wanted to swallow Mantua whole to control its strategic roads and rivers.
And Isabella was largely left to navigate this nightmare alone, because her husband, Duke Gianfrancesco Gonzaga, was a mercenary general. He was constantly away from home, renting his army out to whichever superpower paid the most.
This forced Isabella to run an endless gauntlet of non-commitment. Let's examine how she handled the French threat of 1498.
King Louis XII of France was massing a massive army to invade the Duchy of Milan. The ruler of Milan was Ludovico Sforza.
Now, Ludovico wasn't just a political ally. He was Isabella's brother-in-law, one of her closest friends, and widely rumored to be her lover.
They had a deep personal history. When the French army approached, Ludovico was abandoned by everyone else in Italy. In an act of desperation, he sent frantic letters to Isabella, begging her to send her husband's mercenary troops to save him.
This is the ultimate test of the whirlpool. It is a plea from a friend, a lover, begging for his life. The emotional gravity pulling her to commit to his defense must have been overwhelming. What does Isabella do?
She builds the firewall. She completely abandons him. She refuses to send a single soldier.
It sounds incredibly cold-blooded, but it was the only rational calculation. She analyzed the board and realized Ludovico's cause was militarily hopeless.
The French army was a juggernaut.
If she committed her small forces to his defense, Milan would still fall. But now King Louis XII would view Mantua as an active enemy. The French would march straight through Milan and burn Mantua to the ground. She had to let her friend fall to save her city.
Milan falls easily. Now, the mighty, victorious French King Louis XII is sitting right on Mantua's border, flush with triumph and looking for his next conquest.
Isabella has to pivot instantaneously. The man who just destroyed her closest friend is now the greatest threat to her survival, so she decides she must befriend him.
And she does so with unparalleled theatrical genius. In 1500, King Louis invites her to a massive victory celebration in Milan. She knows she cannot just show up as a defeated neighbor. She has to capture his imagination.
She leverages her greatest asset, her court's culture.
She arrives in Milan wearing the most spectacular, trend-setting fashions in Europe, instantly making the French nobility look provincial. But her masterstroke is a gift.
Tell them about the lion.
Oh, it's incredible. She commissions Leonardo da Vinci, who was a close associate of hers, to build an enormous, fully functional mechanical lion. During the grand banquet, this magnificent automaton walks slowly across the hall, approaches the French king, stops, opens its mechanical chest, and spills out a massive cascade of fresh lilies.
Which is the official floral symbol of the French monarchy.
It is a staggering piece of psychological flattery. King Louis is completely mesmerized. He ignores his generals and his advisors and spends the entire festival absorbed in Isabella's company.
She wins him over with witty letters and this massive party. In exchange for her continued friendship, the king pledges his armies to protect Mantua from the aggression of Venice.
She managed to charm the biggest, most dangerous predator on the continent into acting as her personal bodyguard without ever signing a formal treaty of subjugation.
But the luxury of peace never lasted in Renaissance Italy. No sooner had the French threat stabilized than a new, far more terrifying menace emerged from the south.
The Borgia threat. Cesare Borgia.
Yes. Cesare Borgia is the man whose sheer ruthlessness inspired Machiavelli to write The Prince. He was the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI. Starting around 1500, he began marching an army north through Italy, systematically destroying every small lord and kingdom in his path.
Isabella understood immediately that Borgia was a different kind of animal than the French king. He couldn't be won over with a mechanical toy or witty banter. He was deeply paranoid, entirely untrustworthy, and utterly lethal.
She knew he had to be kept at a distance, but the slightest hint of offense or resistance would give him the excuse he needed to invade Mantua.
So she begins a campaign of killing him with targeted, paralyzing kindness. She doesn't offer him a military alliance. That would be a trap. Instead, she showers him with highly specific, luxurious gifts.
She sends him her prized hunting falcons, pedigreed dogs, rare perfumes.
And the most brilliant, subtle detail of all, she sends him a crate of exquisite, handcrafted masks.
Wait, masks? Why masks?
Because her network of spies had informed her that Cesare Borgia had a habit of wandering the dangerous streets of Rome late at night in disguise.
Oh, wow, so it's like a veiled threat.
Exactly. By sending him masks, she was sending a coded message. I have eyes everywhere. I know exactly who you are and what you do in the dark, but I am choosing to treat you as an esteemed friend.
It was a velvet glove wrapped around a very sharp needle. She even takes the ultimate step of asking this bloodthirsty warlord to be the godfather to her newly born child.
She wraps him so tightly in the superficial obligations of familial friendship that it becomes socially impossible for him to justify an unprovoked attack.
But notice the boundary she sets. When Cesare inevitably asks if he can quarter a few of his military regiments inside the walls of Mantua for the winter, she politely but absolutely refuses.
She knows that once a single Borgia soldier steps foot inside her gates, she will never get them out.
She flatters his ego, but denies him the one thing that would compromise her physical autonomy. And miraculously, her psychological web holds. He conquers the entire region surrounding her, but he leaves Mantua untouched.
It is exhausting just recounting these maneuvers, but she never gets to rest because in 1503, the geopolitical board flips again. The papal threat arrives.
Caesar's father, the Pope, dies. The new Pope is Julius II, known as the Warrior Pope, and he immediately goes to war against the French forces in Italy.
To complicate matters further, the Pope decides to launch a crusade against the territory of Ferrara. The ruler of Ferrara is Alfonso, who happens to be Isabella's own brother.
The jaws of the trap snap shut. On one side, she has the terrifying power of the papal armies. On the other side, she has the French army, who are allied with her own flesh and blood.
The Pope demands her support. Her brother demands her support. If she allies with the Pope, the French will crush her. If she allies with her brother, the Pope will excommunicate her and order her destruction.
This is where Isabella executes a double game so brazen it belongs in a modern espionage thriller.
She decides to play both sides simultaneously. On the public stage, she orders her husband, the mercenary, to take his troops and join the Pope's army.
But in secret, behind closed doors, she explicitly instructs him, march slowly, feign incompetence, do not engage the enemy unless absolutely forced.
So she fulfills her outward obligation to the Pope, providing a completely useless army.
Exactly. Meanwhile, on the other side of the board, she is privately supplying the French commanders, her brother's allies, with highly sensitive intelligence regarding the Pope's troop movements.
She covertly allows French supply lines to pass safely through Mantuan territory.
But how does a small state allow a massive enemy army to march through its lands without the Pope immediately realizing she is committing treason?
She fakes a catastrophe. When the French troops enter her territory, Isabella stages a massive public relations event. She writes frantic, hysterical letters to the Pope and other Italian leaders, screaming that Mantua has been aggressively invaded by the French.
She literally arranges for the French commanders to plunder a few empty fields and stage a mock siege of a border town, purely for optics.
She puts on a grand performance of being a helpless, weeping victim of French aggression.
And the Pope buys it.
He buys it completely. He leaves Mantua alone because he believes she is already suffering at the hands of his enemies. She successfully navigates a war between two superpowers by projecting an illusion of weakness while manipulating the reality of the conflict.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Isabella recognized that taking any side meant eventual doom.
Yeah, if she permanently allied with a massive power like France or Rome, they would use her resources and eventually absorb her state.
And if she allied with a weaker power like her brother or Sforza, their inevitable defeat would drag her down into the abyss with them. Her immense power lay entirely in committing to no one but herself.
And the history books validate her ruthlessness. Every major power that tried to conquer her eventually suffered catastrophic invasions and economic decline. But tiny, fragile Mantua, it thrived for a century after her death.
Building directly on Isabella's waiting game, we need to explore how time itself functions as a weapon for the uncommitted.
Right. When you refuse to pick a side, you grant yourself the ultimate luxury, the ability to let others exhaust themselves. Slowness becomes your greatest tactical advantage.
There are some great historical examples of this tactical delay. Take Huan of Jin in ancient China.
The kingdom of Qin launches a massive invasion into the neighboring kingdom of Qing. Huan, the ruler of a powerful province nearby, observes the invasion. His first instinct, the heroic instinct, is to immediately mobilize his army and save Hishing.
But his chief advisor steps in and physically stops him. He counsels patience. He tells Juan, wait, Chink is not yet ruined, and Qin is not yet exhausted.
It is a profound observation. If Juan marches his army in on day one, it would be a bloodbath. But if he waits...
He lets the two kingdoms bleed each other dry. So Juan sits on his borders and watches the two armies hack each other to pieces for months.
Only when they are both completely starved, depleted, and physically exhausted does Juan give the order to advance.
He marches in with a fresh army, easily crushes the remnants of the Qin forces, and gains the glory of rescuing a ruined state and conquering an exhausted enemy.
He doubles his empire just by possessing the discipline to look at his watch and wait. You see this exact same understanding of time in the story of Talleyrand during the July Revolution of 1830.
I love the imagery of this scene.
Paris is in absolute chaos. 3 days of violent, bloody riots, barricades burning, factions slaughtering each other. Talleyrand is this elderly, incredibly powerful statesman. He is sitting calmly in an armchair by the window, listening to the gunfire.
Suddenly, he hears the great church bells of Paris begin to ring, signaling a clear victor is emerging.
He turns to his assistant, smiles, and says, "Ah, the bells, we're winning."
And his assistant asks, "Who is we, mon prince? Who are we allied with?"
And Talleyrand just shushes him. "Not a word. I'll tell you who we are tomorrow."
The luxury of waiting. Talleyrand knew that only fools rush into the fog of war. If you commit out of panic today and change your mind tomorrow, you look like a traitor.
But by maintaining silence, he retained complete maneuverability. We don't just see this in France or China. This principle is foundational to American history.
George Washington applied this exact philosophy. Following the Revolutionary War, there was immense pressure on Washington to form a permanent military alliance with either France or England.
Objectively, a treaty with France would have offered incredible short-term benefits to a struggling new nation. Capital, trade routes, the French Navy.
But Washington possessed the strategic foresight to see the trap. He knew the danger of siding with anyone.
The risks of alliances are fiercely asymmetric when you are the smaller party. If America allied with France, it would never be viewed as a sovereign equal. It would become a junior partner drafted into Europe's endless wars.
He explicitly warned against entangling alliances. Side with the stronger, you get swallowed up or forgotten. Side with the weaker, you are doomed.
By holding the middle, he forced Europe to view the young United States as an equal, autonomous power.
The brutal reality of allying with a stronger power is that you provide the blood and labor, and they take the territory and credit.
The source material drives this point home with two incredibly vivid fables about the illusion of the referee. The first is about a dog, a cat, and a fox fighting over cheese.
The fox is the universal archetype of the uncommitted manipulator.
Always. So a poor woman drops a large piece of cheese. A cat pounces on it, but a dog tries to snatch it away. They start fighting viciously. Exhausted, they agree to let the fox step in and referee.
The fox approaches with an air of great authority. I will act as a judge and divide the cheese perfectly in two so you are both equally satisfied.
The fox breaks the cheese in half, but he intentionally makes one piece slightly larger. The dog barks, "Hey, my half is smaller."
The fox nods judiciously.
Ah.
You're entirely right. So he takes a large bite out of the cat's half to make them even.
Which now makes the cat's half smaller. The cat yells, "Wait, now my part is smaller." The fox nods sympathetically and takes a bite out of the dog's half.
He continues the charade, continually biting pieces off both sides to make them even until he eats the whole cheese. He walks away, leaving them with nothing.
In any conflict, the party that retains their options and acts as the uncommitted observer, the referee, is the one that walks away with the prize.
And if you thought the cheese fable was dark, consider the fable of the eagle, the sow, and Grimalkin the cat.
An eagle builds a nest high in an ancient tree. A wild sow makes her den down in the dirt among the roots of the exact same tree. For a long time, they live as completely peaceful neighbors.
But then a cat arrives. The cat wants to eat both the eaglets and the piglets.
Tactically, the cat has a massive problem. She is too small to fight an eagle or a boar. She has to manage their focus.
She weaponizes paranoia. She climbs up to the eagle's nest and whispers, "The sow is treacherous. She is planning to undermine the roots, knock this tree down, and feed your babies to her piglets."
Then the cat climbs down and whispers to the sow, "I heard the eagle plotting. The second you leave, she's going to swoop down and carry your babies off."
She creates an artificial conflict, using nothing but suspicion to keep the eagle in her nest and the sow in the dirt.
The eagle refuses to hunt, terrified the tree will fall. The sow refuses to forage, terrified of the eagle. They become committed to defending themselves against a phantom enemy.
And because neither mother will hunt, they end up starving their young. Once they are dead, the cat leisurely feasts on all of them.
The cat never committed to a fight. She simply managed the attention of the powerful until they destroyed themselves.
It perfectly illustrates the listener takeaway here. The uncommitted observer walks away with the spoils.
Okay, so we've heard about foxes eating cheese, cats starving eagles, Isabella dodging warlords. It sounds invincible, but I have to ask, what's the catch? Can you just ghost everyone forever?
No, you cannot. And we need to delve into the reversal section of the source material.
How does the game turn against you?
If you play too many parties against one another, they will eventually see through the maneuver and gang up on you.
Like when two people you're secretly dating find out about each other and team up to ruin your life?
Exactly. Keep suitors waiting too long, and desire turns into distrust. People lose interest.
The magic trick only works for so long.
Precisely. Eventually, you must commit to a side, if only for appearance's sake, to prove you are actually capable of attachment.
But, and this is the absolute crux of the whole philosophy, even when you commit outwardly, you must maintain your inner independence.
Yes. Keep your emotions unattached, so you can jump ship if the alliance collapses.
We have been on a massive journey today. From Elizabeth III's leveraging her virginity for an empire, to Isabella d'Este charming warlords, to fables of foxes stealing the spoils from warring birds.
And the overarching theme: every moment wasted on the affairs of others subtracts from your own strength.
Bringing it back to you, the listener, maintaining independence isn't about being heartless.
No, it's about placing yourself in a position of power where, if you choose to help others, you do it on your own initiative, not because you were dragged into their whirlpool.
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to mull over. Think about the biggest conflict in your life right now where you feel pressured to pick a side. What would happen if, starting tomorrow, you simply refused to fight? Is it possible that the only way to truly win the game is to refuse to play it?